I had just signed the biggest deal of my career. The conference room at the Crescent Hotel was still buzzing with handshakes, polite laughter, and flutes of champagne. Someone from the distributors team had patted me on the shoulder and said, "You did good, Delia, real good," but my mind was already elsewhere. I stepped into the hallway, heels clicking on marble, heart still thumping from the adrenaline of negotiation. I thought maybe I'd call my Aunt Edith, the only one who'd ever really asked about my work. Or maybe I'd message my assistant and ask her to book a dinner somewhere quiet. But then I saw the text. It was from my mother. No greeting. No punctuation. Just this. Give Emery a share of your company and buy him a house. Or don't call yourself part of this family. I stood still in the hallway, phone gripped tight in my hand, my breath caught in my throat, not in sadness but in disbelief. For a moment, I actually waited, expected the next line to say, "Just kidding," or "Let's talk." But nothing followed, just that single brutal sentence. Cold, final, like a wire snapping under pressure. A hotel staffer passed by with a tray of sparkling water. I moved to the edge of the hallway and sat down on a padded bench beside the elevator, staring at the screen. They had meant it. They wanted me after everything to hand over part of the company I built from nothing. Not a conversation, not a request. A demand, an ultimatum, and not just a share. They wanted me to buy him a house too. I felt my fingers go numb, like the blood had drained from them. I had worked myself to the bone for 12 years, building home and morrow from a second-hand laptop and a folding card table. I had sold soaps at farmers markets, taken red-eyes to trade expos, spent nights on warehouse floors counting inventory. Myself, I had sacrificed birthdays, skipped vacations, missed funerals, and now they'd decided I was useful only as far as I could fund my brother's next chapter. Not congratulations, Delia. Not. We're proud of you. Just give it to him. Or you're out. I should have been angry. I should have deleted the message and gone back into the ballroom to toast my success. But I didn't. I sat there in my crisp suit, heels pinching my toes, and felt something else rise in me. Something slow and deep, like heat under ice. Because this wasn't about money. This wasn't even about family. This was about control. And for the first time in my life, I realized they only loved me when they could use me. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to let that happen again. Growing up, I learned early that being the oldest daughter in a Southern family meant two things. You were expected to give without question, and you would always come second to a son who didn't have to earn a thing. My brother Emery is 3 years younger than me. Even as kids, he moved through life like someone had laid down carpet ahead of him. People always said he was charming, that he'd grow into something big. Me, I was the quiet one, the planner, the one who always followed the rules. But the rules were different for us. When Emery got a C on a science test, my mother would pat his shoulder and say, "He's trying his best." When I got an A-, she'd frown and ask, "What happened here? When he forgot his chores?" Dad laughed. Boys will be boys. If I was 10 minutes late from a school event, I got a lecture about reputation and how young ladies ought to behave. And still, I tried to earn their approval. I worked hard. I got a scholarship. I lived at home during college to save money. I took night classes and day jobs. When I started my business in my early 20s, it was out of necessity. I had $800 to my name and a shelf full of handmade lotions. No one believed in it. My mother smiled that tight smile of hers and said, "Just don't get distracted from real work." My father shook his head and muttered something about pipe dreams. And Emery. He laughed and asked if I could make him a lotion that helped with hangovers. Still, I kept going. I said yes to every opportunity. I learned to ship orders out of my garage. I hand-labeled jars. I burned through credit cards and energy drinks. And eventually, it worked. It actually worked. But even then, they never truly saw me. Over the years, they asked for little things, help covering the mortgage when Dad was laid off a new washing machine money for car repairs. I always gave, no strings attached. When Emery changed majors for the 3rd time and needed tuition money, I sent it. When he moved to Austin to chase some startup dream, I helped with rent for 6 months. I told myself I was being generous. That one day they'd notice, but they didn't. They expected. And the worst part, I let them. I let myself believe that if I just kept showing up, kept paying, kept being useful, they'd love me not for what I gave, but for who I was. the text I got that day. It didn't surprise me. Not really. It just made everything I'd been pretending not to see impossible to unsee, because this wasn't about need. Emery wasn't on the street. He wasn't struggling. He'd just burned through his 4th job in 3 years and told my parents he was ready to finally do something big, and their solution: cut me open and hand him what I built. It wasn't even cruelty. It was casual, like I was a resource they'd been storing for later. I sat in my apartment that night and stared at the ceiling for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept hearing my mother's voice in my head. Give it to him or you're out. And for once, I asked myself a different question. Not, why don't they love me? But why have I kept letting them pretend they do? I didn't respond to the message. Not that night. Not the next morning. I didn't tell them how much it hurt. I didn't ask them to reconsider. I didn't try to explain myself or what the company meant to me, or how many nights I'd spent working until my eyes blurred. Instead, I called my lawyer. He'd helped me set up Home and Morrow years ago, back when I was still hand-filling jars and mailing them from a strip mall post office. His name was Harris Bell. Quiet man, wore sweater vests even in summer. Never said more than he had to. When he picked up, I just said, Harris, I need to tighten the whole structure and I need to do it quietly. He didn't ask why. He just said, I'll send you a list tonight. Over the next 7 days, we built a firewall around everything I'd created. Ownership was reviewed, voting rights restructured, emergency trustees removed and replaced. I transferred majority assets into a living trust with me as the sole beneficiary. My healthcare proxy and will were rewritten. No mention of family, no fallback heirs. My financial accounts were insulated. My name was the only one on any title. When it was done, Harris looked across the desk and asked one simple question. Do you want them to know? I shook my head. Not yet. I just want to know that they can't touch it. He nodded and handed me the final folder. Then they won't. I walked home from his office in the fading light of early spring, passing houses with porch lights coming on, parents calling kids inside for dinner, a man watering his roses. Everything looked ordinary, but inside me, something had shifted. For the first time in my life, I had built a wall not to keep myself in, but to keep them out. When I got home, I opened my closet and pulled out a small wooden box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a folded note from my father written when I graduated college. It said, You're stubborn, Delia, but you'll go far. Just remember not to burn every bridge. I held it for a long time before placing it back in the box. Some bridges need burning, I thought. Especially the ones they keep walking over you on. That night, I typed a letter. Not to my parents, not yet. It was to myself. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who only see your usefulness. You're not here to fund their comfort. You're not obligated to bleed for those who've never asked if you're still breathing. This isn't abandonment. This is survival. I printed it out and slid it under the glass of my desk right beside the first $42 invoice I ever made. No fanfare, no threats. Just paperwork, signatures, boundaries. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking anyone's permission to have it. 3 weeks passed in silence. No messages, no calls, no apologies, just quiet. I didn't expect anything else. The moment I refused the ultimatum, I knew what would follow. Exile wrapped in self-righteousness. They'd rewrite the story in their heads, turn me into the ungrateful daughter who walked away for no reason. They were good at that, making absence look like betrayal when really it was just escape. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my cousin Jess called. She never called. We hadn't spoken since my grandmother's funeral, and even then it had been small talk in the church parking lot. Did you hear? She asked, voice low. Your mom's throwing a family announcement dinner at the First Baptist Hall. Saturday night. I paused. What kind of announcement? Jess hesitated. They're introducing Emery's new startup, a supplement brand or something. Your mom says it's a new chapter for the Morrow legacy. I didn't respond. Jess added more carefully this time. They told people it was a joint venture between the siblings. Of course they did. Even now they wanted to borrow the shine of my name while cutting me out of the photo. Are you going? I asked. I wasn't planning to, she said, then quieter. But I think you should. I hung up and stared out the window of my office for a long time. Outside, a city bus rumbled past. A couple walked their dog, and the sun dipped low behind the rooftops. They hadn't invited me, but they had used my name. That was enough. I didn't make a scene. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just took my time. Saturday evening. I parked 2 blocks away and walked in flats carrying a slim black envelope tucked inside my coat pocket. No makeup, no intention of staying long. The First Baptist Fellowship Hall hadn't changed in 20 years. Same chipped linoleum floors, same rows of metal folding chairs. I remembered sitting there as a teenager watching other people get recognized while I stacked plates in the back. Inside, the buffet tables were already half empty, and someone was testing the microphone. Then I saw them. My mother, dressed in cranberry red, holding court near the podium, my father beside her nodding at guests. Emery, of course. Center stage, smiling wide, shaking hands wearing a blazer, a size too expensive. My name was written on a foam board poster propped up beside him. The Morrow Method, a family wellness venture. A lie, a borrowed name, a theft polished to look like legacy. I didn't get angry. I didn't rush forward. I waited, and when the MC began to read the introduction founded by siblings Emery and Delia Morrow, I stepped forward slowly and placed the black envelope on the podium before he could finish. The room hushed. I said nothing. Inside that envelope was a notarized letter from my attorney clarifying trademark ownership, business use rights, and a cease and desist regarding any commercial use of my name or likeness. I met my mother's eyes across the room. She didn't blink. Then I turned and walked out. No raised voice, no accusations, no scene. Just silence. But it was the kind that made people realize something had changed. By the time I reached my car, the first text had already come in. From my father. What the hell was that? Then my brother. You've always had a flair for the dramatic. Hope it was worth it. I didn't answer either of them. Instead, I drove home through quiet streets, the kind you only find on a Saturday night in a town that still believes in family dinners and curfews. I kept the windows down. Let the spring air in. I needed to feel something real after walking through that room full of borrowed pride and polished lies. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt clean, like someone had finally cut the last fraying thread that had been pulling me back for years. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was calm, too. Calm, Delia, I don't know what point you think you were making, but you embarrassed everyone last night. You embarrassed yourself. Then a pause, and the tone shifted. You've always had trouble being happy for others. That's not new, but to sabotage your brother's chance like that, to humiliate him in front of people, that's something I never thought even you were capable of. I played it twice. Then I deleted it. That same afternoon, Emery posted a long, passive-aggressive message on social media. Sometimes the people closest to you don't want you to succeed. That's okay. That's what lawyers are for. He included a photo of the poster cropped, of course, to hide the envelope I'd placed in front of it, but it didn't matter because word had already spread. An old high school friend messaged me. Hey, I was at that event last night, just wanted to say good for you. Took guts. Then an email from a former vendor. Didn't know that story behind the brand name. Thank you for clarifying. Even my Aunt Edith, who rarely texted more than a happy birthday, sent a message. You didn't owe them silence. Not after all they erased. People started asking questions, especially the ones who'd heard my family's version of the story for years. I didn't post a rebuttal, I didn't release a statement, I simply uploaded one photo. It was taken from behind me, standing in front of Holm and Morrow's flagship store, the sign lit up behind my silhouette. No caption, no explanation. The comments spoke for themselves. That's her store. I thought she just helped. Wait, so she's the founder? By the end of the week, Emery had taken his post down. My parents had stopped calling, but someone else hadn't. My uncle, my dad's older brother, a man who had never once involved himself in family drama. He sent an email short and plain. Delia, I read the original partnership agreement in that envelope. Your name was the only one on it. I'm sorry, I didn't know sooner. That was all. No fanfare, no apology wrapped in excuses. But it landed deeper than anything else that week, because for the first time, someone on the inside had said it plainly. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. I had been erased. And now I had stepped back into the story they tried to write without me. I didn't want Emery's startup to fail. I didn't want to shame my parents. I just wanted the truth to take up space again, to be undeniable, to leave no more room for pretending. It's been 4 months since that night at the church hall. No one in my family has called since, no more voicemails, no messages asking how I am, no holiday invites. No, let's talk this through. Just silence. But for the first time, the quiet doesn't ache. It feels earned, like walking out of a room you were never really welcome in and finally realizing you don't have to keep knocking on a locked door. I've stopped checking their social media. I no longer ask mutual friends for updates. I don't scroll for signs of regret or recognition because I'm not waiting anymore. Last week, I sat across from a young woman, a new hire in our operations team. She asked me how I started the company, and I told her the truth. Not the pretty version, the real one. I told her about the night I slept in my car, about the batch of lotion that spoiled and nearly sank us, about the rejection letters, about the way no one cheered for me until there was something to take. She listened carefully, then asked, "Would you do it all again?" I thought for a moment I wouldn't change the work I said, but I'd stop begging to be seen. That night, I walked up to the roof of my building, something I used to do when I first moved in. I brought a mug of tea, an old sweater, and a letter. It was the note my father wrote me when I graduated college, the one I'd kept all these years. I read it one more time under the city lights, then I folded it slowly, pressed it flat, and slid it between the pages of a book I no longer planned to keep. The next morning, I mailed the book to their house. No note. No explanation, no return address. Just something to remind them I was never imaginary, that I had always been there, and that I had chosen finally to leave. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in peace. Sometimes the hardest goodbye isn't loud. It's the one where you don't look back. Delia didn't fight to be loved. She chose to stop proving she was worthy of love that had conditions from the start. If you've ever been asked to trade your peace for approval, if you've ever been erased to make someone else more comfortable, then maybe this story wasn't just hers. Tell us below. Have you ever walked away from the people who were supposed to protect you? We're listening.